Hello, and welcome to episode number 181 of the Board Game Barrage podcast, a podcast about board games, the latest hotness, and how to have fun with your friends, even when you're losing. I am here with all of my friends, and I mean that quite literally, all the people in the world that consider me their friend, Neelan, Mark, and Christina.
Hello. Hey,
Hello.
friend.
This was the moment where friends would go, "No, Kellen, that's not true.
No.
Everybody loves you." Yeah. Were you saying it, Mark? I thought I heard something.
Oh, no, I thought you were saying this was all my friends. I was going to say, no, Kellen, I've got way more friends, but I didn't realize it was about you. I wasn't really listening.
A true friend indeed. We are blessed by Christina's presence, the blue tank, the inspiration for it all. What?
That's where we got the name Board Game Barrage and the tank logo, everything. It was all
Yep.
embodied by Christina.
That's right. It's my personality is the podcast.
Today on the Board Game Barrage podcast, we are going to talk about the games we've been playing and get to our featured topic, which this week is how to participate in the board gaming hobby while not spending too much money. It can seem like the only way to participate in board gaming is through buying, and you may have listened to an old episode of the show where we in fact said buy. That was us, not the Backstreet Boys?
In sync.
God damn it. That was us and not in sync, but there are many ways to participate in the board gaming hobby, and we wanted to have a little roundtable discussion on ideas, both practical and philosophical, on really how to take part in the hobby without having to break your budget, break the bank, lose your Benjamins, money. I'm not very good at that. Okay, now we're going to talk about the games that we've been playing. Christina is going to start us off with taking us back to summer camp. I am going to be taking us to the Wildlands with Martin Wallace, and Neelan is going to deflate all the energy in the room and tell us about Roam and Roll.
What? You don't think Roman Roll is another hot summer game?
Italian summer.
Quiet, Neelan. You were up third on this.
Oh man. Hang on, guys. I need to insert. We had the cookie too early, Kellen.
Oh my
Told
God.
you
This
about
is
this.
We had the okay. She is very adamant that we were going to have a cookie.
I wanted to have a cookie, but I wanted to have it right when there are peaks and valleys, you know, of energy. And especially when you're sick, there's more valleys than peaks. And so there was a window of the peak that at 7 o'clock, and I was like, okay, I just have to maintain it. And I wanted to have this cookie to help.
This is not a euphemism, by the way. This is an actual
What?
chocolate chip cookie.
What would the euphemism be?
I don't know. Keep going. This is
Okay.
a family show.
Okay, so I really love chocolate chip cookies. It's my favorite dessert. So
And
I
that's
don't know.
not a euphemism either.
I don't know what the euphemism could be. I'm just okay. Anyways, well, ice cream is really good too. I have a hard time and cake. I really like cake too. Okay, so today though, it was a cookie. I have a ritual sometimes of having something sweet before the podcast because one, I like sweets, and two, it's just you get a little sugar high right before you start the episode. And I'm sick right now, so I lost my train of thought. I forgot
So
what I
today,
was talking about.
we had the cookie
So today,
at 7:37.
Today, Kellen was like, why can't we have the cookie now at 6:30? I was like, no, we have to wait till before the podcast. So at 7:15, he's like, okay, heat up the cookie. And I was like, no, we can't have the cookie yet. We have to have it right. Do you not understand how sugar highs work? They're very short-lived. And so finally at 7:42, that was the latest he would let me wait. I heated it up. I had the cookie. But then he spent 30 minutes talking. And now I'm crashed and
7:42. We started recording at 7:45. You couldn't maintain that sugar
No.
high.
It's 8:09 right now. It's
Don't
8:09.
tell them that. They don't know that.
It's 8:09, and
I can't believe you
Sorry.
mistimed the cookie.
we mistimed the cookie. Actually, yeah, I guess we mistimed the cookie, and then Kellen talked too long. So, okay, I think I'm ready now.
Great.
Start the show.
Thanks for listening to my story. Okay.
So, Christina, why don't you tell us about summer camp?
All right. Summer Camp is a game that we played this weekend in the summer. It's July right now. We played Summer Camp. We're not at Summer Camp, but it felt like we were at Summer Camp because Summer Camp is a game by Phil Walker Harding that really feels like you're at Summer Camp. It is a deck building race game. You are a camper. You are earning merit badges and you are beating your friends to the end of the race. So in each game of Summer Camp, you are playing with 3 of 7 possible merit badge decks so that every game will be slightly different. And those merit badge decks include things like adventure merit badge, arts and crafts merit badge, cooking merit badge. Those are the ones that we played with. There's like friendship merit badges, all the things that normally happen at camp. Although I actually never went to summer camp. Did you guys ever go to summer camp?
I did not.
No, this is, I would say, a uniquely American thing.
Oh, really?
And it's also like scout themed, but it doesn't want to say that on the box. And as the resident Eagle Scout, I would say that I've earned all of the aforementioned merit badges.
You've earned the friendship merit
Yeah,
badge.
I was going to say.
Well, I can recite the Scout Oath and the Scout Law.
Is that a secret? Are you not supposed to say
The
that?
Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent.
Is that it?
On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country, to obey the Scout Law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight.
2
Is
out
that
of 3
all?
ain't bad.
Be prepared. That's the slogan.
Okay. Well, I guess then Kellen's the only one who's been to real summer camp. For the rest of us, this was our first summer camp experience.
Yeah, and it made up for all the time I felt I had lost as a child.
Yeah, I was always jealous of kids that went to summer camp. So now we finally got to stick it to them. You know, we got to say, you may have gotten to go to summer camp all your childhood, but you didn't get to play summer camp with your best friends.
Yeah.
Take that, Khaled.
Yeah, Kellen. Okay, so anyways, I'll finish telling you about the game. So in the game, you're a little camper and there are 3 different tracks that you're racing on. And you want to be the best at one, but you also want to be the best at all 3. You want your little meeples to stay somewhat aligned on each of their tracks because when you hit certain points on each of the tracks at the same time, you will get merit badges. Are those also merit badges,
Yeah.
Kellen?
Yes.
So there are merit badge decks, and then there are also actual merit badges that don't necessarily have anything to do with the specific deck, but they're like overall camp merit badges. The first person to reach all 3 tracks gets the highest value merit badge, and then the next 2 people can get lower values, but only one camper can be the best at all 3 merit badges. It was me. I was the best camper. You are also racing to the end of an individual track because when you hit the end of the individual track, it's the same thing, but the points are much, much higher. So the merit badge tracks for reaching all 3 points across the board are lower point values. And then if you reach the end of the adventure track first, you can get a 12-point bonus. And then the other players will get lower point values for reaching them after you. What did you guys think about summer camp?
I thought it was a nice deck builder to bring to like a family game night. I think this game isn't really showing you anything you haven't seen if you have played deck builders. So there's a chance that, you know, if you are a quote unquote hardcore gamer and have played a bunch of deck builders, this might be something that is not for you, maybe too simple. But I think it strikes me as, and Kellen sort of mentioned this on the night, that it's like an introductory deck builder that feels sort of like Dominion-y, where you're taking your turns and you're ready to go your next turn really, really quick. Deck builders come in a ton of different flavors nowadays, and this is sort of like a intro to the stripped down, boom, 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 take your action, go, take your back action, reload sort of thing.
You know what the slogan could be for the game? If you're a hardcore gamer, play summer camp to experience summer camp for the first time. If you went to summer camp as a kid, you're probably not a hardcore gamer. Play summer camp to understand what a deck builder is and have fun.
I think that should be the subtitle.
Yeah, I think so too.
Let's put that all on the box cover.
Right.
I think that this game is, like you guys said, it's a super accessible deck builder. And I think one of the things I've said before in the past about the quest for El Dorado is that something that is so interesting about having a race game that is tied to a deck builder, because the sort of normal deck builder metric of collect cards to get victory points kind of just all gets superseded by just get to the end of this track quickly. And Summer Camp sort of does that in the same way. It's kind of like, you know very quickly what your goals are. Get to this track faster than anyone else. Get all 3 of your people past these points faster than anyone else. So that's easy to explain to someone. That's exciting. That's interesting. And the game looks beautiful. But then the mechanic for playing it is a very simple, easy to explain deck builder. Like, there was some discussion about the merits of this versus Quest for El Dorado. And while El Dorado still edges it out for me, I definitely stand by what everyone is saying, that this is definitely the more accessible of the two. Like, this would be the one that if you were trying to teach someone the deck builder that had never played one before, Summer Camp is the game you would break out in that scenario for sure.
Yeah, it's an incredible intro, and it's still very fun. Even like for us, we still had fun playing
for
it.
sure.
But it's definitely in the future. If we're like, what deck building race game do we want to play? We're gonna pull out a Quest for El Dorado.
I was very fortunate to actually have played just straight base Dominion over the weekend with my brother and his friend. And this is so close in how it's set up and how the turns go. Dominion is, for my money, still the deck builder to beat. And I don't think it's been beaten. I get that it is a little bit more multiplayer solitaire, and I will be okay with that given how short and quick it is. Summer Camp was very charming, though, and did have kind of its own funniness to it. I got really good at cooking, and then I won the cooking game, but suddenly my deck was gummed up with a bunch of cooking cards that did nothing for me. And so I kept cursing when I would draw more cooking cards. So that progression and knowing when to stop on one is pretty interesting decisions. And then also, right, we played with just 3 of the decks in the game, and so each one of those new ones is going to add some nuance or different flavor to it that, while I don't know that we'll be returning to explore it as this foursome, I would be happy to play this with others and try out some of the other decks.
I think charming is a good word for it. Neelan and I always refer to Quest for El Dorado as delightful, and I think this feels more charming than delightful, which is a weird distinction, but it makes sense in my head. Okay, can I say to the recording that I'm sick because I just don't want to be judged for normal when I'm actually not functioning at full capacity and my voice sounds weird?
I'll leave that in. You got it.
Okay, that is Summer Camp.
All right, I wanted to talk about a game that we finally got to try. I have had this on my shelf of shame because it is shameful to have 100 unopened games. This is Wildlands by one Martin Wallace, who is famous, right, Mark? Martin is famous.
For sure.
Famous for A Study in Emerald 2nd Edition. That's the game that I love of his. Is he Age of Steam? What is he?
He's Age of Steam. He's Brass.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Birmingham himself?
Yeah, and Lancashire.
The number 3 ranked game of all time?
More Lancashire than Birmingham, I suppose.
Yes. He's the designer of the first overall pick ever in BGB draft history when Neelan took it number 1.
Yes. That is what he's most famous for.
Right.
We had a chance to play Wildlands. And Wildlands, you never know what you're going to get when you play a Mr. Wallace game. This was a tactical skirmish card affair. I, in my mind, was continually comparing it to Wiz War, but it's not quite that. Essentially, you have 5 characters, and you are putting them out on the board wherever you feel like it. And then one of your neighbors is putting out 5 gems anywhere on the board that they feel like it. And then you are playing a free-for-all. And in that free-for-all, you get points for picking up your gems, but you get points for killing your opponents. And every turn, you have to reveal the location of one of your people. So on the first turn, you may only have one of your characters on the board, but by the 5th turn, you've got everybody out. And so once everyone has had 5 turns, there are 15 characters on the board, and there are gems everywhere. And the game is sort of like, well, a hand management thing of what can I do to get my gems, to stop other people from getting gems, and to win this game. The system that you use in the hand management is kind of complicated, but not, where each character you have is a symbol, and that symbol will tell you whether you can activate them, and there's sort of basic things that they can do, like move, and then there are special things they can do, like do a ranged attack, do a melee attack. I had the humorous advantage of having a faction full of really, really weak mages, and then a mobile librarian who had 7 health, a bulking man who was supposed to protect my mages. He did not. I will spoiler alert that. But this really was a really fun affair that didn't last too long. And in fact, I do think that WizWar is the best one-to-one to talk about it in context of. It felt really silly. It was like, oh no, should I go this way? Should I go that way? Mark and I got into a lot of fights and left Neelan alone, and Neelan did what Neelan does when he is left alone. He picked up his gems. He got to 3 points, and then Mark and I went, oh damn, we've got to stop him. And then we tried desperately to stop him. The game has a really silly interrupt system where you can literally say, no, now it's my turn. And then suddenly you're taking cards, but then someone else can interrupt you too. And it all is very silly. But the underlying systems are nice. The hand management is fun. There are multiple maps in the box. I really want to try this at 4. We only played this as a 3-player game. I am eager to play more Wildlands, especially at the length that this game is. It's a filler length, but it did not feel like a filler game. Mark and Neelan, tell us how you feel about Wildlands.
I totally agree. I think the line of it being a filler length game that doesn't feel like a filler is right on. And I think a part of the reason why it doesn't feel like a filler is it feels very Martin Wallace. You know, it feels like a fresh design with some weird aspects to it. When you were teaching us the game, it became very obvious that it was going to be interesting and different. The way that you reveal one of your 5 characters every turn, you can choose to reveal more if you want. The whole interrupt system that you've mentioned where you can just jump in and interrupt somebody's turn and hop in and do your own thing. There's a lot of like Wallace sort of edges there. And so I was excited for that, as I sort of am whenever I hear that I'm going to try a Wallace game that I haven't tried. But what really sort of like struck me and sort of blew me away was how quick it was. Like for all the stuff that's going on, for all the interesting bits to it, we were done in, I think, 45 minutes tops, and we could have probably cut some time off on our second play. It was just like so much game in such a little time. I was really, really impressed and really enjoyed it.
I think this embodies a lot of what we were talking about last week with like rules getting out of the way of the game, because I think about like the way the line of sight system works, and line of sight is something that in a lot of other games is overly convoluted, but this is very simple. If there's a line between the circle in your room and the circle in another room, then you can see them. Like it just takes a lot of simple things like, how does the melee system work? You play a card, and if you have this symbol, you can block that card. How does the range system work? If you play this card, and if you have this symbol, you can block. There's a very quick reference that very quickly maps out how all the actions work and how they're responded to. And then there's like 1 or 2 little quirks like cover, which is exceedingly simple. So like all of the things that you'd expect from this sort of skirmish game are there. They're just in such a super pared down form, so that they get out of the way, and what you're doing is playing cards and killing other players and running around and popping up and being the one that's about to win and then getting hit down, and then Mark's about to win and then you hit Mark down. And like all those highs are there in a very short playtime, but you're not bogged down with wondering what the rules are at every step.
Yeah, something really specific stuck out to me, which is that in WizWar, a lot of times you're setting up for like 4 turns for that perfect moment where you're just chasing people, and it's never like the perfect turn. And then this one, you know, on the 4th turn of the game, Mark goes, aha, I'm right here in the middle of your fight. You know, I've been here the whole time, sir. And it's like just dumb enough that it works, but you're not mad at it. You're just like, oh, wow, now he's in the situation, you know, and we've got to figure out how to do that. And so the entire game itself, you know, probably doesn't last 20 turns. You're still revealing, things are happening, it's fun, it's loose. I was devastated that Christina wasn't feeling well at the time, because I actually feel like she would have made this even funnier and more fun as she desperately clung to trying to win this one.
I did feel really left out, because it's actually a testament to what everybody was saying, because as Kellen was setting it up to explain the rules, and he had barely started explaining the rules, and he was like, don't worry, including rules, it'll be less than an hour, because I was just like barely hanging in there. So I was like, okay. But as he was setting it up and starting to talk about it, I was thinking in my head, there is no way that this will be over in an hour. And so I kind of just made the decision in that moment, like, you know what? I can barely like listen to what you're saying. I don't think I can make it. I'm going to go like take a nap. So I went in to go to sleep, and I looked at my phone. I was like, okay, it's 4:08. I'm going to see what time it is when they're done playing, because I wanted to prove myself right that it was going to be longer than an hour. And 4:08 is when I went to sleep. And then I woke up to this screaming of like, they were yelling. I mean, it was like the type of screaming that made me really jealous. I was like, oh man, I really should have played. And then I looked at my phone, and it was like 4:58 and I couldn't believe it. The game ended 50 minutes after he started explaining the rules. Wow. So anyways, I'll play next time. I think it sounds really fun.
Yep, I think many more plays of this to come. I know there is expansion factions and some different boards that we can check out, but just a very, very clean design and one I'm looking forward to playing again. And that is Wildlands by Mr. Martin Wallace. Is there a formal designation for a train conductor?
Might be conductor.
Conductor Wallace?
Yeah, Conductor Wallace.
You think he'd appreciate that?
Sure.
Conductor Martin Wallace?
I think Conductor Wallace sounds nice. Conductor Wallace.
Isn't he in the Polar Express?
Yeah, Neelan, can you say it?
Conductor Wallace.
What? Why does
See?
Neelan have to
See?
say it?
Because it sounds nicer. You have
It
to.
has a more
You're saying his
lovely
voice
lilt
is
to
nicer
it.
than my voice?
I mean, is this even a competition?
Excuse me?
You're shouting in my ears, and Neelan has the voice of an angel
Yep.
over there.
That's what they always used to say about me.
Oh, we're dating.
But he has the voice of an angel.
All right. Well, I guess we get to listen to this angel talk to us about Roman Roll.
Yeah.
Hoping you can save it, Mr. Angel.
So, Rome and Roll. Rome and Roll is a game by David Turtsey and Nick Shaw, who I was aware of their previous game, Welcome to Dino World. I think I'm getting that name right, which is designed as a heavy roll and write. That's kind of what the idea was. So when they both showed up on Kickstarter with a game that was subtitled as a roll and write Euro game, I was like, okay, they're taking another stab at this. I didn't think Welcome to Dino World was amazing. But Rome and Roll, one of the things that was sort of changing in this space, or at least doing a little bit differently, was having this shared board. So the premise is that you're all nobles or architects rebuilding Rome after
Overseers.
overseers, thank you, rebuilding Rome after it's burned. So part of
Kellen just looked so smug. when he said that.
Oh, what?
Gotcha, Neelan.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting that.
That's not a euphemism.
So a big part of what you're doing in Roman Roll is building these buildings onto this shared map, which are kind of almost like a polyomino game. Every building has a specific shape, and you have to sort of build it next to a previous building, so you're trying to find places to fit it in. And that was, to me, this promise of potentially some more interaction in this sort of genre. So I was a little bit surprised to find out that this is not really that much of a roll and write. It's kind of, I would say, more like a dice drafting Euro game in roll and write clothing. You have these kind of whiteboard style player boards with markers. So everyone has this giant board and it's got tracks on it. You got a coin track and a glory track. And God, Kellen kept calling it the bread track, and now that's all I can think of it as. You have a bread track. Sure, let's just call it that.
Yes.
And all of these tracks are worth victory points at the end of the game, and they all sort of correlate to different aspects of the game, whether that's conquering settlements adjacent to Rome, or building roads connecting those settlements, or trading goods to get victory points, or just building buildings, which is itself victory points. Buildings will also reward you at various points with their production, or you can combo up those buildings with certain actions in order to raise an army, which you use to conquer the settlements, and so on. So there's a lot of these sort of Euro-like connective systems, but this is all wrapped in what is effectively a dice drafting system, where at every round of the game, you're going to roll a bunch of dice so that every player ends up with 2 dice and there's 1 extra in the pool. So you roll all of those and then you snake draft them. So one player picks, second player picks, third player picks, and then you go backwards. Third player, second player, first player.
How is that like a snake?
Because snakes curve back on themselves. Did you never play Snake on your Nokia 3310, Kellen? You gotta loop those goals.
Nokia, sir?
Yeah, Nokia. Sorry. I think we said Nokia in South Africa all the time, and I didn't realize until much later that people were like, oh, wait, no, this is actually pronounced differently. That's a fun story for you. But snakes curl back on themselves in a way that is very reminiscent of a snake draft. And that's that. One thing you can do, which is fun, is that you have these senators that you can collect. You can use them during the draft, spend one and say, okay, I'm going to take my second die immediately. So if you're the first player, you can spend a senator, pick your 2 dice before anyone else gets a pick at them. And those senators are kind of in limited supply. So there's some fun little ways to mitigate the dice. But what you're doing when you're picking these dice is collecting them for a combination of resources that are on them and icons which either enable or empower some of the actions. And those actions are kind of all the things I've said, building buildings, etc. everyone takes their turn, repeat until you've hit certain points on your tracks, which is a little bit roll and write reminiscent. Once you hit certain points on your tracks, you get victory points, and then that triggers the end of the game. But the game does not feel like a roll and write in totality, I would say. Mark and Kellen, you played this with me. What did you guys think of Roman Roll?
I think we should save Kellen for the end because I think he's going to come in hard.
Yes.
So I think that this is a game that would benefit from a second play. There's a lot going on. The production is sort of like strange. It's got sort of like the best and worst in it. You know, the dice are nice and chunky. I mentioned when we were playing it that remind me of like the Seasons dice, which I think are among the best dice in board gaming. These really big dice like that are engraved with different symbols, and you got a shared board, and it's interesting. The idea of writing on a shared board is sort of interesting. You've got a lot of different tracks that you're trying to move up on and different things, resources you're trying to get. But there's a lot going on that I think you sort of like start to grok as you play, and that's why I think the second play would be better. But I still don't know if this is a game that I would ever really clamor to try again, even with the understanding that it's going to be better the second time around. For example, the shared board where you draw on is an interesting thought, and it sort of like makes it into this like shared roll and write. But you're drawing on it, and in order to indicate which building it is, you have to like write the initials of the building, and it's sort of unclear when you're looking at it. It's like looking at it at a glance, you don't really have a sense of which buildings are where and the best orientation to do it and what you're going for. So that sort of felt obstructive. Like if you had like the buildings be tiles, I think it might be clearer and easier to see, more of like a polyomino sort of thing. I can see folks who are interested in the idea of a heavy roll and write being attracted to this. And like I said, I think there's good stuff there. I just don't know what there was about it that would make me really want to play it a second time. I mean, I'd be happy to give it another spin if you or somebody else wanted to, but I just can't see this as a game that I would ever like desperately want to play again.
I think, and sorry to interrupt, Callan, before you jump in, but I think you're exactly right there, Mark. And I think that's actually my biggest issue with it, is it feels like to me like a production mismatch. Like it's almost like they wanted you to get on board with the idea of like heavy roll and write, and the production doesn't match up to the game in that way, because like what you get, the trade-offs you get for a roll and write are cool whiteboards, quick relative marker, etc., but the game is heavier than that, and you almost feel like the game doesn't do itself a service by like not having resources that you're collecting up or tiles that you're placing on the board that make the city look cool as it's growing. What you end up with in Rome is kind of just this mess of multicolored felt pens as people like loosely scribble around squares and write an initial in it. It just doesn't look attractive at the end of the day. And I think this could have been a cool production had they just leaned into it being a Euro game with a more Euro production. Kellen, sorry to cut you off there. What were you going to say about Roman Roll?
I think that you could hear Neelan's first sentence about what the game is and speculate on how I might feel, and I in fact felt that exact way. This was not a game for me. I was very hesitant to agree to play it, and I did so at Neelan's pleading request.
I would call it desperate pleading, just to clarify.
Desperate pleading from Neelan, which, as we've aforementioned, is in dulcet and angelic tones, and it's very hard to say no to. The thing for me is that when you take away from a Euro pretty production, cool bits, and all the fun stuff that you get, you're left with a spreadsheet. And so what this game is that spreadsheet. Like, it's been taken away. None of it is abstracted. You're just marking things off. You know, literally, you're rolling these cool dice, and you have fish, and you have wood, and you have bricks. And then the way the game tells you to mark them on your board is by writing the letter F, the letter B, and the letter S for stone, and then cross them off as you use them. So, like, absurd. Like, at one moment, I thought it was a parody game, and Neelan had designed it, you know, as like a joke to get me annoyed. But it, in fact, is real, and people like it. I think heavy roll and write is a vibe. And I think it's more like a roll and write than Neelan is giving it credit for, personally.
I guess I'd be curious, like, not to like spend too much time on this, but like, other than the fact that you have felted markers in a board and like tracks, which are a staple of every Euro game, like, what mechanically makes it feel like a roll and write?
I mean, dice drafting, comboing are all staples of roll and writes. I mean, I would push back on you and say, what about it doesn't feel like a roll and write? Because I like the shared board, perhaps, is the only thing that doesn't feel like a roll and write. the shared architecture.
I think like the whole turn action structure like almost like breaks. Roll and writes have a very simple structure, which is, roll dice, everyone typically simultaneously does an action, repeat. But the whole thing breaks down into this multiple phase of like there's a dice drafting phase, and then there's an action phase where everyone takes an action that doesn't have to be connected to the dice that they chose. Like it breaks so much of the formula that I actually think it moves away entirely from the genre. I guess the thing I would say to summarize my opinion is that the roll and write structure doesn't do the game any favors, and I think it hurts the game, and I think that is unfortunate from a perception perspective. Because I don't think that the game is straight up bad. I think that the game could be better with some production souls, but there's an interesting dice drafting game where there were fun, high points of combos to be had. But I just don't know that, like Mark said, I don't think it was interesting enough on its own. Like if you remove roll and write from the conversation, it's just another Euro game. And that is so much less exciting to me.
Yeah, I don't even think it's necessarily even that combo-rific. Like, I don't think it's like the combos are that high. My opinion might be tainted by the fact that I had recently played Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, which is, while a flawed game in a lot of ways, very combo-rific.
Yeah, this is interesting because it does beg the question, like, what is the quintessential roll and write, right? Because it's sometimes flip and write, it's sometimes roll and write. So how do we boil it down to what a roll and write feels like? Because if we want to just parse it on a mechanical level, it's obviously a roll and write to some extent because they gave you writing instruments and you're rolling dice. But for you, it doesn't feel like that. And for me, for some reason, it still does.
Yeah, I think that, unfortunately, my opinion is sort of shared with Mark. This is a game that I can see myself maybe returning to once to see if there was something more at the edges of it, but I am not crazy excited about it because I don't think it meets either of the needs of the genres that it's attempting to sort of muddle together. But that is Roam and Roll by PSC Games.
Just a reminder that patrons have one more week to enter their responses into our second draft of the Board Game Barrage Top 100 Games on Board Game Geek. We recorded an entire bonus episode, and that is exclusive to patrons, and we are giving away another $50 gift card to someone within our Patreon community. Thank you so much to everyone who supports the podcast. It definitely means the world to us, and you can find that at patreon.com/boardgamebarrage.
One thing I wanted to call out really quickly at this point is we mentioned a few weeks ago that we have this wiki, which is at boardgamebarrage.com/wiki, which is a cool way to see like all of the episodes we've done, find any game, and see every single episode that game has been mentioned on. And one of the cool things about this being a wiki is that a lot of members of the community are making their own spaces on it, whether that's posting about tournaments or trying to categorize every episode of the show. And one of the people that I wanted to call out that's been kind of a huge force in like pushing this forward has been someone in our Discord whose name I'm going to say out loud for the first time, Cicerana. I hope I'm saying that correctly. But yeah, he's been a great help in just trying to like work through every episode of the show and categorize it and make efforts to like actually push this forward in a way that I think has been really cool. So if you'd like to kind of see all the work that he's been doing and contribute to the wiki, please head over to boardgamebarrage.com/wiki and you can find something there to sort of own as your little space as something to publish.
Yeah, Callan mentioned a couple weeks ago that his dad recommended that we have sort of like dictionary site on our page, and CC Runner or Sys Runner has been building it, so it's just great. He's been really doing a lot of work there.
I think it's cool to see every game that we have covered all on one page on the internet, and that exists on the boardgamebarrage.com/wiki. Look at that plug. And now let us talk about our featured topic, which is how to participate in the board game hobby while not breaking your piggy bank. We were talking about hobbies in general as a group this past weekend, and we had this sort of thought, which is that when you're in another hobby, there's sort of like the good, better, best model where there are diminishing returns on things. You could be really into fishing, and there's a really expensive fishing pole, and then there's a good enough fishing pole, and a lot of the hobby is around reviews and opinions about those fishing poles. In board gaming, that's much harder to do because you can buy the board game or you could counterfeit the board game. There isn't really a way to not buy the board game, but I just wanted to talk about our shared experiences and how we've saved money while still participating in the board game hobby. I think some of the things we will touch on may be self-evident to some, but it may be really helpful if you've never thought about how to either curtail your spending or how to save a few extra dollars. I want to get really, really practical, but also a little bit philosophical. So if you guys have websites that you use or little tricks that you have, all ideas are welcome. The goal is to help people participate in this great hobby while not spending all of their money. I know Mark has got some ideas.
Oh, wait, before Mark goes in, I just want to say, as Mark and Neelan were walking out of our apartment the other day after we were playing games, like as they were walking through the doorway and like we had already said goodbye, Callan was like, think about the fishing pole. So this is the fishing pole episode.
Right.
Go ahead, Mark.
So the easiest answer for me here is one that I've talked about. This is like well-trodden territory for me, but I'm going to start any discussion about saving money in board gaming with math trading. We've done episodes devoted to math trading, one of my very first ones. So that's an aspect of board gaming that I find both fun and economical. I won't go through the entire detail of what a math trade is, but basically what you're doing with a math trade is you're putting up games that you are looking to unload in this trade, and you are selecting games that you want that are offered in the trade, and then an algorithm matches you up so that games you want to give up go out and games that you want come in. And every time there's a math trade, the day where the matches are revealed always feels like a little Christmas to me. So like, middle of July, math trade is wrapped up. I can't wait till the next day because I'm going to find out which games I got. So it's like waking up and finding out, you got a bunch of presents.
But Mark, math trading is hard and complicated. What should I do?
You should do two things, Callan. One, you should first go to boardgamebarrage.com/trade, where there is a link to a video I made about how to math trade. We have an introductory video that walks you through a math trade. And then when you have watched that video, you can participate in the BGB math trade, which is now, I think, the second biggest monthly or close to monthly trade on the internet. So if you go to boardgamebarrage.com/trade, you will find both the link to the video and the link to actually participating in the trade. You can also go to boardgamebarrage.com/discord and go to our math trading channel, which is so welcoming and so friendly. And if you have any questions, the folks there are incredible about helping people out. And our math trades are generally beginner friendly, so you don't have to worry about making huge errors because we check before the final lists are released. So you won't be trading your deluxe copy of Age of Steam for a deck of cards or anything like that.
Mark, talk to me about trading versus math trading, right?
Sure.
Because I see a lot of times there are these Facebook groups that are dedicated to, like, there's a Los Angeles, like where we live, a Los Angeles sell group or a Los Angeles trade group. Have you found that those trade groups are ever valuable if you want to just make it even simpler than a math trade?
Sure. I would say that a lot of those groups, and I think the groups come in a couple of different flavors. There's like the Facebook groups where there's a lot of selling and trading groups, sometimes specific to geographic locations, but also nationwide. And there's also, you have things like Craigslist and sites like that. But I think typically in those areas, you're going to get more selling than trading. Occasionally you can work out a trade, but mostly I think when you go to those sites, you're looking to buy used games, which is in and of itself, and I think maybe we'll get to it later, a way to get games on the cheap, just buying them used. But when it comes to trading, I think the way that you get the most demand, or you have the most like sort of range of potential buyers and sellers and traders, is through Board Game Geek. You can go into your profile in Board Game Geek, click on the trades tab, and then you can, based on the games you have listed for trade on Board Game Geek, you can find people who are looking to trade for your games. And so that's another way to sort of find matches. If I have Paris and Studying Emerald and Sulkin on my for trade list, I can go to Board Game Geek, I can go to the trades tab, click on direct matches, and it will match people who are looking for my games and who are trading away games that I'm looking for. So that's another way to find matches for trades.
All right. I feel like we don't have very good transitions this episode.
You ate the cookie too early.
No, but I think, Ellen, you're usually better at transitions. Remember? You're the transitions man.
Yeah. I actually work on compliments, so I haven't gotten one yet from you this episode.
I just said you're the transitions man.
In the context of you failed thus far.
I'm definitely not being like the biggest trader, certainly like in comparison to Mark, but like I've definitely like used our Board Game Garage trade, and like back when Strategicon was happening more regularly, like using their virtual flea market. And I feel like just invoking that secondary market is such a powerful thing, and something that, yeah, I can't emphasize that people start to utilize more.
I think that once in-person conventions are happening, wow, there is going to be just an influx of games available in the very next math trades and flea markets. So I think that's definitely one to watch. Christina.
Yes.
What do you have to say for yourself in regards to this topic?
In regards to this topic.
Perfect transition, 11 out of 10.
I have, well, one thing is very, very simple, and it's the age-old adage. Is that something people say, age-old adage? It kind of sounds cool, huh? It's the age-old adage, try it before you buy it. How about that?
You're just full of wisdom.
Okay, so I think that this has become more and more possible with the amount of games available to play online. I think that a lot of times, if there's a game that we think we might be interested in, we will literally just like try a game on Board Game Arena or Tabletop Simulator. And while that is not my favorite way to experience a game, I think it's enough of a demo, and it's kind of reminiscent of like going to a convention and having a literal demo of a game where it's really just giving you a flavor of it. You're not getting the full game, but it's really cool because you don't have to spend the full length of time that the game requires. You get to try a bunch of different games at that shorter length at conventions. And similarly, when you're playing online, you're not getting like the full tactile experience of playing the game, but you get a really solid feel for it. And then you can play it a few times and then be like, okay, I get it. I don't need to buy this. Or it's like innovation and you're like, okay, this is the best game ever. And then you buy all of the deluxe editions.
I love that a lot of publishers are leaning into this, especially in the context of Kickstarter, you know, like having that tabletop simulator module or having that Board Game Arena implementation live as the thing is, you know, in the process of being funded. I think that's such a huge boon, because without that, I am exactly the sort of person that would just like, you know, I think I'm going to like this. Maybe I'll skim the rule book, hit pledge. And that used to be me a lot. But like have already been instances over the past year. Like I'm reminded of Carnegie, for example, which I ended up playing like 3 or 4 games on Board Game Arena because it was easy to do that. I was playing a lot of games asynchronously at the time. And that was enough to convince me, like even from like the second game, I don't think this is a game that I need to own. And like suddenly that's a lot of money because, you know, Kickstarters are by their nature fairly expensive for those sorts of heavier games.
Yeah, I think it may be a little counterintuitive, but even attending conventions that cost money, you can end up saving money just in the ether of both getting to demo games and also getting to play games that you wouldn't otherwise play. You know, they talk about con games where there's that one crazy guy named Kellen who has all of Cthulhu Wars in the corner. And, you know, you don't need to own Cthulhu Wars, but it would be cool to be able to talk and have played Cthulhu Wars. So you can do that at a convention. I think the demos at conventions are like my number one favorite part because it stems my need to get the full game. It's like, oh, I get it. I know what this feels like. And then you have that very rare exception. You know, I still think about Gizmos by Cool Mini or Not. I played this engine builder game that's sort of billed as a take on Splendor, but with more going on. I never got to demo it with Neelan, but I still think we might like it better, and I still have that kicking around as something. And to have that positive reinforcement, I know I'll eventually pick up that game, or Mark will get it in a math trade, and then we'll play it. But it's a way to be able to talk about that game, even though I have never owned it.
You're in luck, Helen. I was just recently gifted a copy of Gizmos.
Oh,
and
what?
We can now play.
How did that happen?
Just happened
when
randomly.
Did you
gifted it
when
to
did
you.
You get it?
It was a friend in South Africa gifted it to me.
All your friends are on this call. That's what we
No, unlike
said
you,
at the
Kellen.
beginning.
I have other friends across
What?
the world. Similarly angelic voices. No, yeah, we should play that.
Yeah, I want to get super practical. I want to recommend the Board Game Deals subreddit, which you can find at boardgamedeals.reddit.com. Notice that's the first plug that's not at Board Game Barrage. You know, we can plug other things. This subreddit is up to the minute deals. I want to be careful with deals because deals can bite you. And I think that Neelan and I kind of go back and forth on this often, where we'll kind of egg each other on. And in fact, I did this to Neelan today when I saw something that was available for sale. I was like, hey, Neelan, you might like this. And I sent it to him. And so that's a little bit more like enabling purchasing as opposed to getting a good deal. I use a system in my own personal life to decide if I want something where I write it on a list. And then if it's still on that list after 1 month, I will purchase the thing. And so there are some psychological experiments, philosophies, where they say that just the act of putting something in your cart actually quells some of the desire for you to own that object. So they talk about what you can do to literally get rid of that feeling. It's just put the item in your cart, walk around the store with it and then go put it back. And you have envisioned sort of what it's like, and then you don't need the object. So I use that with sort of a rotating list where if something is on that list for 30 days, that means I really want it. But every time I look at that list, I'm evaluating it against the other things on the list. So frequently, board game deals are in a weird gray area where if I don't want it at $30, I probably don't want it at $20 either. That's the true. Am I wrong?
Yeah. No, I think.
Why are you laughing?
I think that's right. It's funny because I think I have without having done this consciously, I have a version of this same sort of process you just described with Kickstarters, which is the idea that I'll do the $1 pledge now, and if I still want it by the time the Kickstarter ends, then I will follow through with it. But what that ends up happening is I forget about all of these pledges, and I just end up with pledging $1 on a bunch of Kickstarters that I'm never going to get, which is not a good way to save money. But it does actually quell a lot of, like you said, Kellen, it does quell a lot of that sort of immediacy of oh, this is hot. Everyone's talking about this. I have to back this now. And then by the time 3 weeks later rolled around, you're like, I don't really need this.
And to piggyback off that one step further, and this is something I've mentioned before, but I just have to say it again. When it comes to Kickstarters, when it comes to games that are new, that are high priced, that haven't been sort of vetted by the board game world at large, I just can't help but sort of think of previous hot games and where they are now. I mean, this is sort of my method of calming down when I'm getting really excited about buying a game and potentially make a impulse purchase. It's so many examples of the past, Tapestry, Stonemaier was going to release it, and it was this hot game, and people were paying over the odds, and it was had to get it, had to jump in and see what this thing was, and now it's $20. All these games that seem like that they're the be all end all, hottest of the hot, you're going to miss out if you don't get it early. Time and time again, even the good ones are proven to be it might be a great game, it might be a fine game, but if you wait a couple months even, you'll be able to get it at usually a pretty good discount. So just that need to jump in early, I think, is often punished.
And worse than that, Mark, because we're not always just talking about close to the retail price or a little cut above. A lot of the times these are hundreds of dollars of Kickstarters. If you're the sort of person that will, if I'm going to back this, I may as well back for all of it. When that all arrives and you don't like the base game and then you just have a closet littered with boxes and boxes of expansions, that's the worst case scenario in this whole thing. And that kind of segues into kind of something else that I kind of want to talk about, which is just kind of letting go of that idea of completionism, that you have to have everything associated with a game, that you have to have every expansion, you have to have every promo, you have to have every custom game trays insert. Oftentimes one of the things I'm trying to do more and more is just tell myself, just have Mark's voice play in my head. If I want it, I will be able to get it later. Sometimes you don't always want to fight foregoing everything, but in the case of Kickstarter, maybe just get the base game, get the cheapest possible pledge, or use a system like Kellen mentioned, where you sort of ask yourself closer towards the end, after that initial rush, is how much of this do you really need or want? Resist the temptation to tell yourself that you need all of it and you need all of it now.
And I think another great way that's in the same context is to have a game group that is rotating the purchase. You are sort of splitting the cost of things and getting to all participate in it. Neelan and I do this a lot. Mark, it's much harder because his collection is always changing, and what he had on Tuesday he may not have on Wednesday. Then he'll have 2 versions of it by the following Tuesday, one of which is autographed by the designer and the other is some crazy out-of-print version that you've never heard of. But, even something as recent as Oath, Neelan and I were both pretty set on backing it, based on the track record of PAX Pamir, based on how much we love Root, based on how amazing the artwork was, based on that Kickstarter page and wanting to be on it. And then it's sort of like, well, who are we going to play it with? It's 9 out of 10 times it's going to be with each other. And so either one of them is going to sit in my closet, one of them is going to sit in his closet. And I'll be honest, when Neelan opened up Oath and put it on the table, I said, damn it, he got me. He won this one, because we take turns. It's like, I'm going to go in on this one and you don't have to. I backed Stationfall. Another one that I think we both will like, and it's sort of like, well, we both don't need this probably, but you can split the cost, get the full experience, right? Because you can't play Oath by yourself. Well, actually, you probably can. Can you play Oath by yourself?
It does actually have a solo mode, but I don't know that anyone would recommend that.
Yes, it is a good thing this is not a video podcast because you would see my furrowed brow at the idea of playing Oath solo. But those experiences are shared, and so it doesn't matter who owns the thing as long as everybody plays it together.
And I think like the example of Oath and that style of long-form campaign game where you need, ideally, a committed group is exactly the right context for this conversation, right? Find the 3 other people that you're going to play this with and say like, hey guys, like, do you mind helping with the cost of this a little bit? Like, and I know that gets weird in the context of like physical ownership, but that's not a conversation that you can't have if you're trying to find people to like stick with a game.
Another thing that is also very simple and practical and maybe a no-brainer. Well, I guess I'll pose it in the form of a question. We all like resource management games, right? Where you're maximizing your resources. You have like this great efficiency, your limited resources, the most efficient thing. Well, what else has limited resources?
Planet Earth.
Yeah. So I think I have.
Wait, the answer's Planet Earth?
The answer's Planet Earth. I have a budget, and I budget like everything in life. And I think that it maybe has a bad reputation in terms of being like a really nerdy or boring or like something that you don't really need to do. I don't know. I think that it has the reputation of being this horrible chore, but I think it can actually be really fun. It literally can be like a game. Like you're taking these limited resources that you have and you're trying to maximize them in the most efficient way possible. It's literally a board game. And like I use like spreadsheets and it's
like Roman roll.
Just like a Roman roll.
Felt tip marker.
And I think that if you go into it with a plan and you can kind of start tracking your spending and then figure out like, oh, I actually do have this much spending money per month and I want to spend half of that spending money on board games. It just feels a lot more, it feels like you can buy things more confidently because you have decided beforehand, like I'm okay to spend this money and now I'm going to do it. And then when you do it, you don't feel like guilt about it. It's like you've already committed that money and that's its job.
Totally. I think You Need a Budget is great software if you're actually looking to make a budget like this. I think we've done entire podcast episodes around our $100 collection and tried to min-math, what's the best collection you could get for this amount of dollars. One of the things I always think is so fascinating at Gen Con or at conventions is there are many people who don't buy any games throughout the entire year, and then they bring their $400 board game budget to Gen Con, and it's really about, what are the 10 games that I'm going to get at Gen Con, with this $400, and they're really trying to figure that out, and that's actually part of the game. That's the fun. I would say don't buy games at Gen Con if you want to save money, but who am I to say, what those people are doing and enjoying that? I do use a similar system in terms of my discretionary money. If it's $70 a month, $50 a month, whatever you can afford, maybe you have to save up for a few months so that you can get the big game like Rising Sun, or maybe you're happy buying one filler game per month and that's what you're into doing. I think budgeting is maligned more than it should be, especially among hobbyist board gamers who love resource management efficiency engines.
That's what I'm saying. You guys laughed at me, but it's true.
Well, I think we're nearing the end of this one. Any hot takes, any last-minute thoughts
Don't buy
from the
Kickstarters,
gang
don't buy
before we
games
close
new,
this one?
trade and buy them used. Easy money.
Wow. Neelan?
And make sure you have friends like Mark has, the friends that Mark has, so he doesn't have to buy anything new.
That's right.
That's a strategy? Is that what you're
That's
saying?
a strategy.
Wow.
Mine would be like, don't go overboard on single games. Like, don't get everything that exists for one game. Don't get all the custom stuff. Don't sleeve games as much, maybe. Like, that's something I'm also trying to cut down on. Is I resisted the temptation to sleeve all of Oath, which by any metric is probably the one game I acquired this year that I should sleeve in terms of like its desirability and secondhand market, etc., etc. But it's just a lot of cards, and that's money. That's a lot of money to keep doing that for every single game.
And the last thing I would be remiss not to say, or we would be remiss not to say, is that if you feel FOMO from all the board games and feel like you just have to keep buying them, you can go on information diets. There is a lot of research and talk about sort of just being overwhelmed and bombarded by information all the time, information that you might get from board game podcasts like Board Game Barrage. So if you really are having trouble either sticking to a budget or just feeling like you can't spend money on board games, I've gone dark on all board game content before. I have stopped listening to all board game podcasts and stopped watching all board game YouTube videos in times when I have other things that I'm focusing on, whether that's monetary focus or whether that's sort of just life focus. The FOMO does go away if you are not participating at all, and that might be what you need for a time. You know, we'll be here when you get back, if you come back. And I think there's tons of meetup groups. That's just the last thing I would say. All of my board game friends I have met through board game meetups. You can go to meetup.com, just search the word board games. Board games are mostly a social activity. And if you can find others that are participating in that hobby, there are always hobbyists who are buying all the games and hoping to find people to play them with. And so that is another great way that you can participate in this great hobby. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast. You can talk to us at Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. You can talk to us on Facebook at boardgamebarrage.com/Facebook. You can email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at BRDGameBarrage. You can...
Wow, you're really good at that.
Compliment.
Well, you lost my... Oh, this is the
a compliment.
Oh, yeah, now I'm going to be on. Thanks, Christina. Thank you so much to Heart Society for their song, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album, Wake the Queens. Thank you all for listening to the show. And thank you, Mark. Thank you, Neil. And thank you, Christina, for being my friend.
Only friends.
Wow.
You're welcome.
Thank you, and good night.
Good night.
Bye. Go England.
Bye.
It's coming home. It's coming. Football's coming home.
All right, so I'm going to hit start recording. I don't know what that looks like.
Hello,
Loading.
hello.
Oh. Do you guys see this
5,
number?
Oh,
Four,
my goodness.
3, 2, 1. Ah.
Okay. Are we live?
We're live, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. And
How
there's,
many people are watching right now?
Ooh, yeah.
we could go. We could
Thank
go
God.
live, actually, and do this on YouTube.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
it does do that straight. Oh, it says uploading now on the top.
No,
Well,
are you serious?
It is, right? It's.
What?
I want to get really, really extreme. No, I want extreme. I want to get.
It's coming home. It's coming.
Okay.
Football's
I'm gonna hit
coming
stop.
home.
Neal's singing.
Oh. I'm not going to hit stop.
Well, now you ruined
Well,
it.
I wasn't. Oh, we're supposed to do off the record. Do you want off the record?